You see, one of the greatest lessons God wants us to understand is that not every battle is ours to fight. When we encounter a narcissist, our first instinct is often to call them out, to confront them, to set them straight. We feel the urge to expose their lies, to challenge their arrogance, to show them that we see the truth. But here's the problem. When you engage a narcissist, you're stepping into a battlefield that's already rigged against you. You're walking into a war where the rules are stacked, where logic often fails, and where your heart can easily become the casualty. And God, in His infinite wisdom, wants to protect your heart before anything else. Your heart is sacred. It's the dwelling place of God's presence within you. It's where His voice speaks, where His peace settles, and where your spirit is nourished. When you rush to confront a narcissist without caution, you're inviting chaos into that sacred space. You're opening the door for frustration, bitterness, and resentment to creep in. And the truth is, these people don't operate like you or me. Their minds are wired for manipulation, their words are designed to twist and distort reality, and their actions are meant to provoke an emotional reaction. If you're not careful, you will be drawn into their game. And in that moment, you risk losing more than just patience, you risk losing peace. God doesn't call us to engage every lie or every offense. He calls us to guard our hearts. Proverbs tells us that above all else, we should guard our hearts, for it is the wellspring of life. And this is what guarding your heart looks like. It looks like restraint. It looks like discernment. It looks like choosing the battle you can actually win, the one over your own spirit. It means recognizing that some people are not capable of receiving correction, and some words, no matter how true, will never bring understanding. Your job is not to educate a narcissist. Your job is to honor God with the way you respond, and that begins with protecting your own heart. Imagine a delicate vase, hand-painted, full of intricate beauty. Now imagine a narcissist comes along, throwing stones at it, trying to shatter it. What would make sense? Would you run out and argue with them, risking every crack and chip? Or would you shield the vase, keep it safe, and wait for the right moment to restore peace? The answer is clear. God is telling us to shield our hearts first. He's telling us that our spiritual life, our joy, our peace, is more valuable than winning an argument or exposing a manipulator. And there's power in this pause. There's power in restraint. When you guard your heart, you're not running away. You're not being weak. You're being wise. You're saying to God, I trust you to handle this situation because I cannot rely on my strength or understanding alone. You're choosing to preserve the integrity of your spirit rather than letting someone else's pride dictate your peace. And when you do this, something amazing happens. You become untouchable. Your tranquility cannot be hijacked. Your life cannot be dictated by the opinions, criticisms, or manipulations of others. You walk in freedom because you refuse to hand over your heart as a battlefield. This doesn't mean you ignore reality or avoid accountability. It means you prioritize your relationship with God over every confrontation. It means that before you speak, you pray. Before you react, you pause. Before you try to correct, you listen to the Spirit. You're learning to let God be your voice, your shield, and your guide. And when you operate from that place of divine protection, every decision, every word, every action is infused with wisdom that the world cannot teach. So remember this, when you feel that urge to call out a narcissist, when your mind is racing with every retort and every rebuttal, slow down. Take a breath, guard your heart. Protect the sacred space within you. Let God's wisdom direct your response, because the heart He gave you is priceless, and the peace He offers is unshakable. And in that sacred place of trust and restraint, you will find strength far greater than any argument, far greater than any victory you could ever claim in your own power. Your heart, guarded and surrendered to God, is untouchable, unshakable, and unstoppable. One of the hardest lessons we ever have to learn in life is that not every fight is ours to fight, and not every word needs to be spoken. When we encounter a narcissist, the instinct is immediate. We want to respond, to defend ourselves, to put them in their place. But God in His wisdom shows us a far greater power in silence than we ever imagined. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strength under control. Silence is a weapon that cannot be bent, broken, or misused. And when we choose silence, when we respond with calm instead of confrontation, we are walking in obedience to a higher wisdom that far surpasses our own understanding. Think about it for a moment. How often has trying to correct someone made the situation worse? How often has speaking truth to a narcissist only fueled their pride, escalated their manipulation, or left you drained and frustrated? That is because narcissists do not operate in the realm of reason. They do not hear correction. They do not receive honesty. They are designed to provoke a reaction, and when we give them that reaction, we give them exactly what they came for. But God calls us to respond differently. He calls us to pause, to step back, and to allow silence to speak louder than words ever could. Silence is powerful because it preserves your dignity. When you do not react to every jab, every insult, every manipulative comment, you protect yourself from falling into the trap of emotional entanglement. You are refusing to let someone else dictate your mood, your peace, your worth. You are saying, I will not allow this person's pride to control my heart. I will not hand over my peace for the sake of proving a point. And when you do this, you are not ignoring the problem. You are choosing a higher path, a spiritual path, a path that aligns with God's vision for your life. There is a story in the Bible where Jesus was confronted, insulted, and mocked, yet he often responded with silence. He didn't engage every accusation or argument. He didn't need to explain himself to every critic. His silence was not a sign of weakness, it was a sign of authority. It was a demonstration that he trusted the Father to handle injustice, that he would not let pride or anger dictate his actions. And we are called to follow that example. We are called to respond not with the sharpness of our tongue, but with the quiet power of faith. Silence also gives you clarity. When you step back, instead of reacting immediately, you give yourself space to breathe, to pray, and to discern the right course of action. Emotional reactions are fleeting. They are clouded by anger, hurt, and frustration. Silence allows God to speak, to guide, and to illuminate the path forward. It allows wisdom to rise in your heart and directs your actions in a way that is both purposeful and righteous. You begin to see the difference between what needs to be addressed and what needs to be released. You begin to understand that responding in anger never leads to resolution. It only perpetuates the cycle of toxicity. There is also a subtle, almost unspoken power in walking away with grace. When a narcissist expects a response and you give none, they are forced to confront the fact that you are not a pawn in their game. Your silence becomes a mirror, reflecting their own instability and reminding them that their tactics no longer hold sway over you. And the most beautiful part of this is that your peace remains intact. You have chosen to keep your spirit whole, to guard your heart, and to let God's wisdom govern your reactions. That is a victory that words could never achieve. So, let your silence be intentional. Let it be your prayer in action. Let it be a demonstration of trust in God's timing, in His judgment, and in His power. Do not rush to prove yourself. Do not rush to defend your honor in the world's eyes. The only approval that truly matters is God's. And when you respond with silence, you are saying more than words ever could. You are showing that your life, your peace, and your heart belong to Him. You are choosing His wisdom over your impulse. You are choosing obedience over pride. In a world that glorifies confrontation and loud declarations, choose the quiet strength of silence. Let it protect your soul, preserve your dignity, and demonstrate the power of faith in action. Because when you respond with silence, you are not retreating, you are rising. You are not surrendering, you are standing firm. And in that stillness, God moves in ways you cannot see, working on the situation, working on hearts, and ultimately working on you. The power of restraint is greater than the power of words, and the peace that follows is unstoppable, unshakable, and everlasting. When we face the challenge of dealing with a narcissist, it's easy to feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on us. We want to fix things. We want to correct them. We want justice. But God, in his infinite wisdom, reminds us that our role is never to exact revenge. Our role is to pray, to seek guidance, and to align our hearts with his purpose. Because trying to handle a narcissist in our own strength is like trying to hold back a river with our bare hands. It's exhausting, it's futile, and it leaves us drained and frustrated. But when we turn to God in prayer, we tap into a power far greater than our own. Prayer is not just asking for help. Prayer is surrender. Prayer is acknowledging that there is a higher wisdom at work, a divine plan unfolding, and that our understanding is limited. When we pray for guidance instead of retaliation, we are saying, God, I cannot control this person, but I trust you to guide my heart, my words, and my actions. And in that moment, everything changes. Suddenly, we are no longer reacting out of anger or pride. We are responding with intention, with clarity, with a sense of purpose that comes from above. God sees the motives of the heart. He knows when we are tempted to lash out, to speak sharp words, or to expose someone publicly. He knows the cost of engaging in conflict that is not ours to fight. And he invites us to bring every frustration, every hurt, every confusion to him in prayer. This is where true strength begins. When we stop trying to be the judge, the jury, and the executioner, and instead allow God to be our counselor, our guide, and our shield. Praying for a narcissist is not easy. Our natural instincts rebel against it. We want them to feel the consequences of their actions. We want them to recognize their manipulation. We want them to see the truth. But God calls us to a higher standard. He asks us to pray for wisdom, for discernment, and for transformation, both in their hearts and in our own. Because when we pray, we are inviting God to work, and he works in ways that our human minds cannot imagine. Sometimes the transformation happens in the other person, and sometimes it happens within us, teaching patience, humility, and reliance on him. When you pray instead of retaliating, you are protecting your spirit. Retaliation keeps you trapped in a cycle of anger and frustration, but prayer lifts you above it. Prayer reminds you that you are not alone, that God is actively working, and that you do not need to prove yourself or win a confrontation. Your peace is more valuable than the satisfaction of exposing someone else's faults. By praying, you are strengthening your relationship with God and building spiritual resilience that cannot be shaken by manipulation, lies, or criticism. And prayer gives you perspective. It allows you to see the bigger picture, to understand that your encounter with a narcissist is not about them. It's about your faith, your obedience, and your growth. God often uses difficult people not to harm us, but to refine us, to test our patience, and to deepen our dependence on him. When you approach these situations in prayer, you are choosing growth over conflict, wisdom over impulse, and peace over pride. You are learning to trust God's timing and God's justice, rather than forcing a resolution that could backfire. It's important to remember that prayer is action, not passivity. Praying for guidance is not the same as doing nothing. It's preparing your heart to respond in a way that aligns with God's will. It's equipping you to set boundaries, to protect your peace, and to act from a place of clarity rather than emotion. Prayer sharpens your insight, strengthens your resolve, and fortifies your spirit so that when you do engage, if engagement is necessary, it is done with wisdom, composure, and divine direction. So when you feel the urge to call out a narcissist, to confront, to retaliate, stop. Take a deep breath, fall to your knees, bring the situation, the person, and your heart to God. Pray for guidance, pray for wisdom, and pray for his will to be done. In doing so, you are choosing the path of spiritual strength, not human impulse. You are choosing obedience over pride, peace over conflict, and faith over fear. And in that quiet moment of surrender, God will not only guide your steps, but will also guard your heart, showing you that the greatest power lies not in what you say or do, but in what God can accomplish through a heart fully surrendered to him. When it comes to dealing with a narcissist, one of the most important truths God wants us to embrace is the power of boundaries. You see, boundaries are not walls built to punish others or to isolate ourselves. They are protections, sacred lines drawn to guard our hearts, minds, and spirits. A narcissist will test your limits at every turn. They will push, manipulate, and provoke to see how far they can go, but God calls us to be vigilant, to set limits firmly and faithfully, not out of anger or vengeance, but out of wisdom and obedience. Boundaries are an act of self-respect. They are a declaration that your peace, your dignity, and your well-being matter. When you allow a narcissist to cross every line, to speak over you, to invade your space, or to manipulate your emotions, you are essentially giving them permission to dictate your life. But God teaches us that our lives are His gift, and He calls us to steward them carefully. Setting boundaries is one way to honor the life, heart, and spirit that He has entrusted to us. A boundary does not have to be complicated or confrontational. It can be as simple as choosing when to speak and when to remain silent. It can mean limiting contact, declining unnecessary engagements, or refusing to respond to manipulation. It can even mean protecting your social, emotional, and digital spaces from toxicity. Each boundary you set is an act of faith, a tangible way of saying, I trust God to protect me and guide my interactions. I will not allow pride, manipulation, or cruelty to dictate my peace. Boundaries are also a teaching tool, not for the narcissist, but for yourself. They remind you where your responsibility ends and where God's begins. You cannot control a narcissist. You cannot change their heart. You cannot force them to see truth, to apologize, or to act with integrity. What you can do is control your own actions, reactions, and space. You can determine what is allowed into your life and what is not. God calls us to act with wisdom, to choose carefully, and to walk in obedience to His principles. Boundaries are the mechanism by which we exercise that wisdom. There is a freedom that comes from boundaries. There is peace that comes from drawing a line in the sand and refusing to be drawn back into chaos. When you live without boundaries, you are constantly at the mercy of the narcissist's whims, reacting to every provocation, losing sleep over every slight, and questioning your worth based on their distorted lens. Boundaries give you clarity. They give you space. They give you the ability to breathe, reflect, and act with purpose. They are a shield for your spirit, a safeguard for your mental health, and a demonstration of your trust in God's guidance. Boundaries also teach others how to treat you. While a narcissist may resist or rebel against limits at first, over time, boundaries reveal the consequences of their actions. They show that your peace is not negotiable. They communicate that you will not tolerate abuse, manipulation, or disrespect. And in setting these limits with grace and consistency, you are modeling a life of integrity, self-respect, and spiritual obedience that cannot be shaken. It's important to remember that boundaries are not meant to punish, isolate, or shame. They are meant to protect, preserve, and guide. They are a reflection of your understanding that your life is sacred, your heart is valuable, and your peace is worth defending. When you set boundaries, you are not acting out of fear, you are acting out of faith. You are choosing to honor God's wisdom rather than your own impulses. You are choosing to protect the well-being of your spirit rather than be consumed by the chaos of someone else's pride. And here is the beauty of boundaries. They free you to act with love, not resentment, with clarity, not confusion, with wisdom, not reaction. They allow you to navigate difficult relationships without losing yourself. They give you the courage to walk away when necessary and the strength to remain present when God calls you to endure. Boundaries are not a sign of weakness. They are a mark of spiritual maturity, a testimony to your faith, and a practical tool for living a life guided by divine wisdom. So, establish your boundaries firmly and faithfully. Protect your peace, preserve your heart, and trust that God is in control. Let every limit you set be an act of faith, a shield for your spirit, and a reflection of the wisdom that comes from walking with Him. When you do this, you are no longer at the mercy of manipulation. You are no longer a pawn in someone else's game. You are standing strong, grounded in God's truth, unshakable in your dignity, and unstoppable in your peace. Walking away from a narcissist is one of the most counterintuitive things God ever asks us to do, and yet it is one of the most powerful demonstrations of faith and obedience. The The world teaches us that confrontation is strength, that standing our ground means arguing, proving ourselves, and forcing others to see the truth. But God's way is different. His way is higher, wiser, and more effective. Walking away with grace is not an act of surrender, it is an act of trust. It is saying, I will not allow someone else's pride, manipulation, or toxicity to control my heart. I trust God to handle this situation, and I choose to preserve my peace. It is difficult to walk away. Our instincts scream at us to fight, to call out every lie, every slight, every manipulation. We want the satisfaction of exposing the truth, of forcing recognition, of reclaiming control. But in doing so, we often lose the very thing we are trying to protect: our hearts. Narcissists thrive on attention, on engagement, on the emotional reactions of others. When we confront them, we feed the cycle. When we walk away, we break it. When we walk away, we take back control of our own lives. And in that act of faith, we demonstrate a strength that words cannot convey. Walking away requires courage because it goes against the natural desire to be heard, to be justified, to be seen. It requires faith because it asks us to trust God with what we cannot control. We cannot change the narcissist's heart. We cannot force understanding, compassion, or accountability. But God can. And when we step back, when we release our need for control, we make room for His justice, His timing, and His transformation. We no longer carry the burden of trying to fix someone else. Instead, we carry peace, clarity, and strength. Grace is an essential part of walking away. It is not bitterness or resignation. It is a choice to honor God above all else. When we walk away with grace, we do not speak with anger, lash out, or carry resentment. We do not gossip, we do not retaliate, and we do not allow bitterness to take root. Instead, we maintain our integrity, preserve our dignity, and reflect the character of Christ in every step we take. Grace transforms a potentially destructive situation into an opportunity to model strength, patience, and spiritual wisdom. There is also power in releasing control. One of the hardest lessons we learn is that we cannot force others to change. We cannot demand recognition, correction, or reconciliation. God calls us to trust Him with that responsibility. He is the righteous judge, and His timing is perfect. Walking away is an acknowledgement that we do not need to orchestrate outcomes. We do not need to manipulate or argue to achieve justice. By stepping back, we allow God to work in ways we cannot see, to move hearts, to reveal truth, and to orchestrate circumstances beyond our imagination. Walking away also protects your future. Engaging with a narcissist often drains us emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. It consumes energy that could be better spent on growth, faith, and relationships that align with God's purpose for our lives. By choosing to step away, we create space for healing, clarity, and peace. We preserve the well-being of our hearts so that we can thrive, rather than merely survive in the face of toxicity. And here is the beautiful paradox. Walking away does not mean weakness. It means strength. It means that you are strong enough to refuse to participate in a cycle of manipulation. It means that you are mature enough to trust God rather than your own impulses. It means that your peace, your integrity, and your spiritual health matter more than being right, being recognized, or being validated by someone who cannot see truth. When you walk away with grace, you are not running from the problem, you are rising above it. So, let walking away be an act of faith. Let it be your declaration that your heart belongs to God, that your peace is non-negotiable, and that your dignity cannot be compromised by someone else's pride. Step back, release the need for control, and trust in God's perfect timing. Let Him handle what you cannot, and focus on what you can, your response, your heart, and your life. In doing so, you demonstrate a strength that cannot be measured by confrontation, a courage that transcends fear, and a faith that can move mountains. Walking away with grace is not defeat, it is victory, a quiet, unwavering, unshakable victory rooted in trust, obedience, and divine wisdom. Ultimately, the most important truth to remember when dealing with a narcissist is that you are not the judge of their heart, and you are not called to expose their faults. God is the righteous judge, and His timing is perfect. We often feel the pressure to call out the lies, to correct the arrogance, to reveal the manipulation, but when we step into that role, we risk losing more than we gain. God reminds us that His eyes see all things, that He knows every motive, every secret, every deception, and that His judgment is always just and complete. Our responsibility is not to mete out justice. Our responsibility is to trust Him with it. This trust is not passive. It is not a resignation to circumstance or a turning away from responsibility. Trusting God to expose truth is an active choice. It requires patience, faith, and humility. It requires the courage to release the need for immediate vindication and to surrender the desire for control. When we rely on God to bring light to darkness, we are aligning ourselves with a power far greater than any human confrontation could achieve. We are acknowledging that His ways are higher than ours, and that His plan is perfect. There is freedom in this trust. When we stop trying to expose the narcissist ourselves, we release the heavy burden of constant vigilance, of strategizing, of reacting. We no longer have to monitor every word, every action, every manipulation. That weight, that constant tension, is lifted when we hand it over to God. And in that space of surrender, we find peace, clarity, and strength. Our lives are no longer controlled by someone else's pride or deceit, but by the steady, unwavering hand of God. Trusting God also cultivates patience. It teaches us that not all truths need to be revealed immediately, and not all battles need to be fought with words. Some truths unfold over time, and some hearts are softened only by God's timing, not our confrontation. When we call out a narcissist in our own timing, we risk creating conflict, resistance, and further division. But when we wait on God, we allow His wisdom to shape the outcome and His justice to accomplish what we cannot. In learning patience, we grow in spiritual maturity and understanding, and we demonstrate a faith that cannot be shaken by temporary setbacks or provocations. This trust also safeguards our integrity. When we attempt to expose a narcissist ourselves, we often risk compromising our own character. Anger, frustration, and pride can seep into our words and actions without us realizing it. But when we trust God to reveal the truth, we maintain our dignity. We act from a place of calm, clarity, and obedience rather than emotion. Our lives become a testimony to the power of faith over impulse, to the strength of restraint over reaction, and to the peace that comes from walking in God's guidance rather than our own understanding. Faith in God's timing also allows transformation to occur. Sometimes the exposure we seek is not for the narcissist's punishment, but for our own growth. God uses these experiences to teach us discernment, patience, and reliance on Him. He shows us how to set boundaries, walk away with grace, and respond with wisdom rather than emotion. When we trust Him to reveal truth, we are also allowing Him to refine our character, strengthen our spirit, and guide our lives toward greater freedom, peace, and purpose. And finally, trusting God to expose truth reminds us that we are never alone. We do not have to fight for recognition, vindication, or justice on our own. We serve a God who sees, who knows, and who acts according to perfect wisdom. Our role is obedience, patience, and faith. Our role is to protect our hearts, preserve our peace, and live in alignment with His principles. The outcome is not ours to dictate, but His. And when we surrender that control, we experience a freedom that cannot be achieved through confrontation or argument. So, release the need to call out a narcissist. Let go of the desire to expose, to correct, or to demand recognition. Trust God to handle what you cannot, to bring light where there is darkness, and to reveal truth in His perfect timing. Focus instead on your own heart, your own growth, and your own obedience. Walk in faith, set boundaries, respond with grace, and protect your peace. Because when you trust God to expose truth, you are not giving up. You are rising to a higher standard, a higher power, and a higher purpose. And in that trust, you will find strength, clarity, and peace that no human manipulation can ever touch.